Yeah. Yeah. This is really interesting. And I'll tell you why. Let's go to the first slide. Um, oops. How do I get to the first slide? Oh, come on.
You're here to teach me. I'm not.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm hitting the right buttons here, but it's not. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
There
there
we
you
go.
go. There you go.
Yeah. So, sorry that the post on the right kind of bleeds off, but that's okay. Well, here's the funny part. You know, either I'm super intelligent um, or I get lucky. But I wrote my post on the left, uh, 12 hours before Elon wrote his post on the right. So, but I mean, he's been intimating this, and I've been picking up the clues, and I've been seeing what's been going on here in his brain and how he's thinking about it. So yeah, I don't want to take credit like I got ahead of Elon Musk on this. No, 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 that's not what happened.
No. I don't think you got ahead of Elon Musk, but you were the one that kind of started the thread. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it comes down to like what we're going to talk about what inference really is in a minute because I think we should level set it. But um, the idea here is that this part of the compute of AI, what Elon's saying, what I think I'm trying to say here, is it'll come out to the edge, and we have certain examples of that are just obvious and we shouldn't just ignore. I mean, the most obvious example is FSD itself. I mean, it is inference on the edge. It means that there's a chip running, an AI chip running in the vehicles that's running, computing the model every 15 times a second to compute our drive, photon to control. Um, so we're already doing inference at the edge. It's just what Elon's trying to say here, and we'll get into it in a deeper way, is that, that's why he's saying it's an easy prediction. So therefore, I'm not to be credited with any kind of obviousness, outside obviousness. But, basically what we have is today we have these, incredibly large data centers. And maybe a lot of people think of them as what are they doing for AI? Well, they're training a model. Well, actually what they're doing, 90% of their compute, that's a made up number. I mean, a large and increasing percentage is the inference side, which is the use of the model. In other words, when you go into ChatGPT or Grok and you say, tell me about something, that's all inference. But that request is going back to a data center,
right,
and it's happening at a large scale, centralized pool of servers. I mean, it's dispatched to some server, but we've got consolidated power leveling. We've got the cluster of GPUs. In the case of inference, it doesn't have to be a coherent cluster because it's not all operating together. You're just dispatched to some computer that's running it, effectively a GPU, right? And so what Elon's saying is, well, as we get into more and more of this stuff, where we get into the heavy use cases, meaning like LLMs right now, like ChatGPT and Grok, they're word based, so we call them token based, right? We take the words and they're converted into these numeric representation of words called tokens, and so they're kind of lightweight. Like there's not a lot of data there. I mean, even in a query response that's pretty significant in Grok, I mean, what is it? It's not that much data. But when you ask Grok Imagine or any of these other generative tools to build video,
right,
now you're talking, a much heavier lift, okay, and you're talking about more data. And so what this means is that all that data, that lift, meaning the compute, has to happen inside some data center, and so it's expensive to happen inside said data center. And then everything has to be transferred over the network. Everything has to be transferred over the network, the internet, as we know it. So it leads to a lot of consolidated expense. And so what Elon's saying is, look, we can't keep going this way. Ultimately, we need to spread it to the edge. And in certain cases, it's required. In other cases, it's optional. We'll talk more about that.
Okay.
But he's saying there's a trend here. And this is what we talked about a bit last time, where we were talking more about the AI6 chip that Elon announced in the Q2 earnings call. And I mean, that chip is largely all about inference at the edge, because the edge devices in the case of that chip, at least the first two primary edge devices, are vehicles for FSD autonomy and Optimus. And each of those vehicles will have, each of those devices, edge devices will have approximately two AI6 chips each, right? So that's inference at the edge. Let's do this. Let's level set. I think this might be useful for the audience.
Sure.
If you know what inference is, you can skip this part. But I think it's important, and we'll run through this by talking about FSD,
Okay.
since most of the audience understands what FSD is. So, what happens with FSD is we train a model, okay, and that's the left side here, and this is done in the data center, and we take an enormous amount of training data, not 5 little objects like I have here, but billions upon billions of training data set, driving samples, driving data sets, and we push them through this coherent cluster at the Cortex data center in the Gigafactory in Texas. And we run these through epics, and we do all this stuff, and we produce a model. Okay. And that model becomes a version thing, like version 12 of FSD, or version 13, or version 13.297 or 299, or version 14 coming soon. And so this is a process that's, training is a process that's extremely compute heavy, runs for many weeks at a time, literally. Like, it's a long, long process. I mean, we don't know exactly, but I would argue that it's probably, to build version 14 was at least 2 to 3 months of fairly solid, compute. And by the way, take a pause on that and think about what I just said. You have a data center that is in Austin there at the Gigafactory. It's 500,000 square feet, consumes power of like a small city.
Yeah.
And that power is being utilized, and the compute is being utilized for 3 months, 24/7,
Right.
to produce this model. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Energy in, wealth out.
Yeah, energy in, yeah, wealth out, maybe. So let's be clear. This produces a model. That's the little represented by the little light blue box there, and that model, once it's produced, is read-only, meaning like the car doesn't change it.
Right.
Okay, the car does not change the model at all. So now let's flip to the other side of the screen, the right side, and talk about inference. So this is the use of the model, right? And the use of the model in the case of FSD is driving, and inference happens 100% on the car. Well, I'll put an asterisk on that, but we'll come back to it. But for the sake of argument, inference happens 100% on the vehicle, and it is the use of the model. And as I said, the model's read-only, and we take that trained model and we run it through with sensor data, our photons from cameras, 15 to 30 times a second, and we output control values. And we rinse, wash, repeat that infinitely during a drive cycle. So that's inference. But to kind of lift it up a bit, inference is the use of the model in any case, whether it's you asking a ChatGPT, Grok, any LLM a question and getting an answer, whether you're asking an AI to generatively build an image or a video, that's all inference. And because AI is expanding so galactically, in other words, the use of AI is permeating all aspects of everything, right? I mean, it's starting to. It's probably in the first inning, but it's definitely starting. Is it inference becoming a larger portion of the compute? I mean, like when OpenAI first released ChatGPT, was it 22 or 2023? Boy, can't remember now. Remember it was the fall. Anyway, um, no, while it was the most downloaded app ever, blah 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 blah, the inference was sort of paled in contrast to the compute required to build the model.
Right.
Now, obviously, after users crowd this app and ask more and more questions, more and more inferences occurs, and then until you build a new model, you're sort of amortizing the inference over the life of the model. So that's the backdrop here, and now we should talk about why Elon or others potentially think it's moving to the edge, and what does that mean?
And I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but let me ask you a question that just occurred to me. Will specifically with regard to FSD, will the FSD version 5, or I'm sorry, hardware 5, hardware 6, will it have memory? Will it have reasoning? Will it have agentic capabilities?
In the case of FSD?
Yeah.
Yes and no. I mean, what I think is that FSD is probably the perfect example of something that in the short term doesn't need any of those things.
Right. In the short term, right.
Yeah, in the short term, to a certain extent. Where it needs some capability there is what I call one-off or user-specific use cases, right? So live in a gated community, you have to know that the car should enter through the right-hand lane, only your car, because it's license plate red, and there's no way the car couldn't know, like FSD inherently couldn't know that out of the box, that you,
right,
as a resident, take the right-hand lane and your guests take the left-hand lane and talk to the guard tower. So things like that, where you're talking about what you might call user preferences, they're probably achieved in a more straightforward way, frankly. They're probably just part of what is called the context window. So to a certain extent, the idea of a memory is just that. It's what we do when, like, when we're using ChatGPT, and let's say we ask it a question and we say, I don't know what, how does this medicine, how do these two medicines interact? Okay. Are they contraindicated? Blah, blah, blah. And we ask those kind of questions, and then it comes up with an answer. And then we say something like, let's say we say, how does medicine A affect a medicine B? Okay. And then just the very next question, we go, how about medicine C? Right. Well, how does it remember that that medicine A, that now it needs to compare A to C, not A to B? Like, how does it know A? And it does, right? It has a memory. Well, all it's doing is it's taking the previous data through that content and just shoving it back through. You don't see that. It's not like visible to you, but you have this thing called a prompt. The prompt is where you put together your question. It's kind of a little strange to call it a prompt, but it is your question. And maybe you think that's the only thing that it's looking at, and somehow it's maintained this server-side memory of your interactions, but really it hasn't. I mean, that's not a completely true statement. If you look at Grok has a history, but the history is rather simplistic. It's not being held in the AI in some beautiful perpetuity inside the compute. It's just on a server somewhere. There's a history of your questions and answers. So when you talk about a memory, usually what that relates to today is just this context window, which is just sort of an extended area of the prompt. And it's just kind of taking the data from the previous. So it might say something like, tag it, say, here's the previous interactions on this, and then here's the new question. And so when the inference side gets it, in this case on the server, it says, "Oh, I have all this other data, so I can rebuild the context."
Mm-hmm.
In the case and remember what you can do with that context is you can also store it. You can store it locally on the device or perhaps in the cloud, and then you could potentially replay it at any point. In other words, what I'm trying to say is if you think about raw inference, if you think about a data center and you think about you put in a question and some GPU picks up that question, it inherently doesn't have all that context. It has to go grab it, or it comes with the question. So one of two things occur there, right? FSD could use this kind of memory, and it could use it for, in other words, it could memorize that gate scenario.
Right.
And it may have several others, or it could memorize things like timing on a traffic light signal. Like, for example, when it comes up to a traffic today, FSD, when it comes up to a traffic light, it doesn't know how long the yellow is. That's not in its brain. It's not been trained on that specific intersection.
Right.
It's trained on intersections as a whole, but it knows nothing about the intersection of Main and First.
Right.
So, you might say, "Oh, wow, it aggressively went through the yellow," or "Oh, it stopped," but it could it could track that locally on the vehicle. And it could say, "Oh, I saw that intersection before, and I recognize when I come this way, I have a 15-second yellow or whatever." And it could use that in its decision framework. But if it were to do that, Randy, it's going to kind of hold it and kind of push it through in its own, like, what's the data coming into the center? We've talked about this other times. Like, well, we mostly have camera data, but there's other data that comes through. There's the IMU, the inertial management unit. There's the GPS. There's the previous control values, so it can smooth the control values. There's and there's other data, right? There's other data. Part of that data is potentially a memory that can be pushed through, so that next inference cycle can use that memory effectively. That's a long-winded answer to your question.
Good. No, that's good. I like it. That's very helpful. All right. Yeah. Okay. I'll let you go back to where you were.
Yeah. Well, and then you did ask a question about reasoning, and I in some ways I don't know how to answer that. Because what we see in terms of FSC's response from photon to controls is inherently its reasoning today. And will it get better? Yes. And when it gets better, version 14 and then 15 and then 16 and so forth, we'll perhaps think of it as a more reasoning forward, I think when we think about reasoning in FSD, we would have to conclude that it's largely about particular circumstance.
Yeah, I think I'm probably getting ahead of myself because I'm probably thinking about a time when Grok is more integrated, with the car.
Okay.
And when you would ask it a question,
yeah,
or give it a command, even say, in these circumstances, I don't want to go this fast. In the rain, I really want you to slow down to the slope anybody's going or something.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I didn't realize you were headed there.
No, I didn't probably realize it either.
Yeah. No, so let's peel this onion a bit. The integration of Grok with FSD will be quite amazing, I think. And it will allow the vehicle controller, no longer is that person the driver. They're not even really the supervisor in unsupervised FSD, but they are the person that is probably in charge of the drive.
Right.
I say that because if you have multiple people in a car, Grok wants to hear from the owner and not necessarily. A passenger could ask a question, but a passenger probably shouldn't be instructing driving behavior. Right. So, for example, how Grok would be utilized in my gated community example is it say as it enters this 2-lane gated area, you might say, I'm going to say, "Hey, Grok," just because it feels like you have to prompt the thing, but you probably don't. "Hey, Grok, I'm a resident. Please take the right lane." And it may respond to you, "Okay, do you want me to do that at all times with this car?" Yes, it's specific to this car. This car is, registered. So yes, with this car, always take the right-hand lane, proceed to the gate, wait for the gate to open. It will open automatically and proceed.
Right.
Okay, I'll remember that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, it's doing this kind of reasoning at a very human level. It's interacting with you at a human level. And therefore, you could do things to other example like, "Hey, Grok, this light has a really short yellow, so I don't want you to try to run the yellow." Or, "Hey, Grok, I think this intersection is a bit more dangerous. There's sometimes people run the red lights." Now, I don't know if, certainly Grok would be available to do all sorts of other things for the drive. And frankly, I think Grok will be the primary interface for the rideshare user in every robotaxi, right? Because what will they be able to do? They'll be able to talk to the car. There'll be nobody in the car. The safety observers or, drivers or whatever we want to call them will go away. And so it'll be just you and any passenger you take with you. And therefore, you'll be interacting with the car in a very natural voice way, and the car will be able to respond. And the car, not necessarily the car, but your inherent Tesla account will build a memory.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get in the car 3 times a week and take it to the airport, or and you prefer this route, it may question you, but it probably knows what you prefer already.
Right.
And
then and as a side note, I think I've heard you say it or Elon say it, that Grok and the car, the FSD, will also have to limit what the owner can say, or limit what the owner can respond, what the car can respond to. So it can't do something illegal or do something dangerous just because this owner has decided, hey, let's go 100 miles an hour through this stretch.
Right. Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, there'll be a lot of constraints there.